Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated. Please state your name for the record. Spell your first and last names.
Joanne Bednarzprashad, Joanne Bednarzprashad.
Dr. Prashad, good afternoon. Let me provide you with some information and instructions which I give to every witness in every case. The first, please sit back and relax. The second, please speak in a loud voice, and that way all of us can hear you. The third, if you are called upon to provide an answer which can be answered yes or no, use those terms rather than slang or which can be confusing. And the last, please wait until you hear an entire question before you respond. In our daily lives, many of us are used to talking over each other because we think we know what the question is. But in a courtroom, it's important to have the entire question first and then a response thereafter. Is that all acceptable?
Yes.
Thanks. Ms. Brazil, direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please tell us what you do for a living.
I'm an internal medicine physician at Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston, Texas.
How long have you been a practicing physician?
9 years.
What did you do before you were a physician?
I was a professor of microbiology at the medical school in Houston.
Do you work in a clinical setting or specifically and strictly in a hospital setting?
I'm a hospital-based physician. I take care of acute and critically ill patients in the hospital.
Dr. Prashad, on June 25th of 2009, were you working in the pre-op clinic at the Hermann Hospital in Houston, Texas?
Yes.
Did you have a reason to get in touch with a gentleman named Dr. Conrad Murray?
Yes, I did.
Would you please describe for us the circumstances which required you to reach Dr. Murray?
Yes. As a hospital-based physician, I'm sometimes called to come and help evaluate a patient who may be coming for surgery. And I was called to the pre-op clinic to evaluate a patient to make sure he was ready from a medical standpoint to have his surgery. And the patient had a history of peripheral vascular disease. And the question that I was called to help understand was a question that was between the surgeons, the anesthesiologist, and me, and that is, is the patient ready for surgery?
And Dr. Prashad, the starting point for your inquiry into the readiness of this patient to proceed with surgery would be what? Reviewing the charts?
Yes, of course, seeing the patient, taking the history, doing a physical exam, and understanding the patient's prior history, and then reviewing the charts of any prior admission.
Did the patient advise you that he or she had recently had a procedure and that procedure was performed by Dr. Conrad Murray?
Yes, he did.
Did the patient advise you that he was taking medication?
Yes, a part of the pre-op evaluation is to find out what the patient's past history is and what medicines they're taking. In this case, the patient was taking some medicines that were of concern to the surgeons and the anesthesiologist.
And why was it a concern?
Because the patient had peripheral vascular disease, he was on a medication called Plavix, and that was the concern at that time.
And how did the concern with the patient's existing medical condition and the prescription medication that he was taking, how did that interact with your concern about the procedure that he was about to undertake in your hospital?
The patient had an open wound on his leg and needed surgery to debride the wound, which was a deep wound, went to the bone, and so would be facing surgery that would be involve a lot of curetting and digging into the bone to get rid of any necrotic tissue. And because of that, there would be the expectation that there would be additional bleeding from the wound. And the patient being on a medication like Plavix, that's what caused the question. Can the patient continue to take the medication or not?
And the concern arose between yourself, the physician in charge of evaluating the preoperative condition of the patient, and the patient's anesthesiologist and the surgeon, correct?
That's right.
Explain the anesthesiologist's role in all of this, please.
The anesthesiologist is the person who has to determine whether or not the patient can tolerate the anesthesia. Can the patient tolerate being put to sleep and intubated, and then have the surgeons come in and do the surgery? And so their concern is if there is extra bleeding during the surgery, do they want to know if that's going to be a risk? Is there any way to avoid that?
So what was the next step that you took in order to fulfill your duties to determine the patient's readiness for surgery?
I learned from the patient that he had had a stent placed in the arteries of his leg. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but describe what a stent is, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. A stent is a device that helps to keep a blood vessel open. And they're commonly used in arteries of the heart, sometimes in the arteries of the periphery, especially in the legs.
And so determining that this patient had a stent in his leg, you learned of his medical history, and what steps did you take to obtain further information regarding his readiness for surgery?
I asked the patient when the stents were placed, and they had been placed about 4.5 months ago. And then looking over his list of medicines, I saw that he was taking Plavix. And then the question then arises, is it safe to stop the Plavix or not? And at that point, the length of time that a patient usually stays on Plavix is about 6 months after the stent is placed. Plavix is an antiplatelet medicine that's designed to reduce the risk that platelets will cause a clot in the stent. So I asked the patient who his cardiologist was, and he gave me the name and phone number, and then I called Dr. Murray's office.
And when you called Dr. Murray's office, what were you attempting to achieve?
I wanted to ask Dr. Murray his opinion about this particular patient and whether or not I could tell the patient it would be safe for him to stop the Plavix and have the surgery.
And when you called Dr. Murray's office from the telephone number given to you by the patient, what information did you obtain? Were you able to speak with Dr. Murray?
I called Dr. Murray's office and was given a second phone number, and so I called that number and it went to an answering machine. Then I called back to the initial clinic number because the patient was in my clinic. We needed the answer to the information, and I asked for any other way to reach Dr. Murray, and I was given a second phone number.
Now let's just backing up for a moment. It appears from your recitation of your work with this patient that obtaining accurate medical information was very important to the determination as to whether this patient would be able to have surgery that day or not. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you taught in medical school the importance of charting information regarding a patient?
Yes.
Is it something that you yourself consider to be important?
I need the whole question first. Ask the whole question.
Is that something that you yourself as a physician consider to be important?
It's not relevant to the
Overall,
testimony.
you may answer it.
Yes, I do.
And why is that?
It provides me as well as other caregivers for the patient to know what the previous care of the patient had been, what the outcome of various procedures, medications, treatments had been. And without that, it's difficult. The patients sometimes don't know the details of their medications or their procedures. They know the outcome, but not necessarily the specifics of what happened.
So you make your second attempt to reach Dr. Murray, And are you successful at the second number that you have been given?
Yes, yes.
So you dialed up the number, and what happened next?
The phone was answered. I identified myself as Dr. Prashad at Herman Hospital.